Ooh. Kapow. This is Moses. Moses was raised in the house of Pharaoh, but he was born a descendant of Hebrew slaves. At the time of Moses' birth, Pharaoh, fearing the size of his slave population, decreed that all Hebrew newborn boys be thrown into the Nile River, and not for a swim. Fortunately for Moses, when his mother threw him into the river, she included a basket. Needless to say, when Moses came upon an Egyptian severely beating a Hebrew slave, he felt compelled to intervene.
Could you stop with the...
It was at that moment that Moses realized he had ruined his life. Moses fled Egypt, settled in a land called Midian, and became a shepherd. One day, while herding his sheep, he came upon a bush that was ablaze, and yet wasn't consumed. The bush spoke to Moses, telling him that it was the Lord God, and that Moses was to lead the Hebrew people out of Egypt to the promised land of Canaan. Moses wondered if God had confused him with someone else, someone a bit more qualified. Since childhood, Moses had always felt nervous around other people and had great difficulty speaking. Moses knew what he wanted to say, but the words seemed hesitant to come out.
Hi.
God suggested that Moses bring along his brother Aaron to speak for him.
Let the Israelites go.
Let the Israelites go!
But it didn't seem to help. So God placed a series of plagues on Egypt, turning their water to blood, followed by a plague of frogs, gnats, flies, a plague on livestock, skin boils, hail, locusts, darkness. And then came a plague on the firstborn, which killed all of Egypt's firstborn sons, including Pharaoh's son. And finally, Pharaoh had a change of heart. But shortly after the Israelites left Egypt, Pharaoh changed his mind. Again. The Israelites found themselves trapped with their backs against the Red Sea, facing certain death. But God had a plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did the water go? Oh dear.
I'm thirsty.
Are we there yet?
As they made their way to the Promised Land, a majority of Moses' time was absorbed dealing with all of the peoples complaining. God had never said this would be part of his job. Moses was beginning to see why God hadn't mentioned it.
What about the sand? Can't you do something about all the sand?
It was maddening. As God instructed, Moses climbed Mount Sinai and received God's laws that the Hebrews were to follow. Moses brought God's laws to the Israelites, and they unanimously agreed to follow them. And then they didn't. God was furious and told Moses that the Israelites would be destroyed for their disobedience. Moses knew that there was no sense in him questioning God, and yet he spoke. He pleaded for God to have mercy on the Israelites, and to his complete and utter shock, God listened. As punishment for the Israelites' continued disobedience and complete lack of faith, God told Moses they were to wander in the desert for 40 years, so that none of that generation would enter the Promised Land. At 120 years of age, after 40 long years in the desert, Moses was able to send God's people into the Promised Land. Though God would not allow Moses to enter because of a certain incident. One might think this is the incident, but they would be wrong.
I'm thirsty.
God forbid Moses from entering the Promised Land for hitting a rock.
Here's your stupid water.
However, God did let Moses see the Promised Land, and it looked all right. As far as he could tell.